So good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's CIO Insights. We are thrilled to have everyone join us today. We're pleased to have our third collaboration with CIOs in Columbus. And I want to thank our member company who's been very active with us, is Covail. They're based in Columbus, but we're figuring out lots of ways to create pathways to Columbus and Pittsburgh to Columbus. So thank you to Covail for helping to connect us with these regional leaders. If you don't know anything about Covail, just quickly, they actually are new to Pittsburgh. They enable enterprises to build intelligent operations to reduce risks and total cost of ownership through AI, automation, and cybersecurity solutions. So today, throughout the panel discussion, feel free to add your comments and questions and conversations into the chat. We like this to be conversational and interactive. We'll take some of your questions at the end of the panel discussion, but you can make comments or just engage as we're going through. So I'd like to thank our Insight Series sponsors. I'd like to thank our partners at CGI. If you don't know CGI, they're pretty significant in our region, and they've been amazing partners with us on all things related to technology. They're one of the world's largest IT and business consulting services with over 400 people right here in Pittsburgh. They also have people in Columbus as well. They have been in the region for over 30 years, and today they develop innovative solutions side by side with their clients and in their own innovation center. And they actually made a really lovely acquisition a couple of years ago that provided them added capabilities of a Pittsburgh-based firm. So thank you, CGI. Comcast Business, hopefully you've all heard of Comcast, but on the business side of the house, they actually are responsible for powering up Pittsburgh's top businesses that in the community, a responsibility they take very seriously. They provide enterprise solutions, network connectivity, managed services that enable business to simplify their network in the face of dynamic innovation and allow for tech solutions that put customers at the forefront in this vastly moving business environment. They also have been very involved in community and civic work, helping us in terms of eradicating the digital divide that really hit all of us right in our stomachs as the schools shut down and as we saw that people were so divided in terms of their access. So they have really accelerated a lot of programs. Thank you, Comcast Business. Avanade, and also Avanade, they're a global professional services company providing tech consulting and services in Pittsburgh. And they're the #1 Microsoft partner worldwide. They're focused on Microsoft platforms, specialized in AI, business analytics, cloud, app services, digital transformation, the modern workplace, which is exciting, and security services, tech, and managed services. So thank you, Avanade. And Snowflake, Matt Zabelski, I always get his name wrong, so I'm sorry, Matt. I'm just going to call you Matt. From Snowflake is here to tell you a little bit about Snowflake. He's going to welcome and set the stage for the panel. And they've just been really great partners, and their presence here in Pittsburgh has really made a difference. So I really want to welcome Matt, and then I am going to sit back. I'll come back at the end, and I'll be listening throughout the panel. So thank you all for being here, and I'm going to pass the baton to Matt.
Thank you, Audrey. Appreciate it, and thanks to everybody at the PTC as well as our executive speakers for putting together today's CIO Insights event. My name is Matt Zabielski. I'm the sales director for Western PA for a company called Snowflake. I know most of you are already familiar with us, but if you're not familiar with Snowflake, we are a data platform built for the cloud, available across all major public cloud providers. You probably will be hearing more about us in the coming days and weeks as we prepare for some significant company milestones. But if anybody has any interest in discussing Snowflake in more detail, please reach out to me. Don't want to give too long of a commercial this morning. But without any further delay, it's my pleasure to introduce our MC for this morning, Stephan, who's Vice President of Consulting Services for CGI.
Thank you, Matt, and appreciate being here this morning. I'm sure everyone's excited after the Steelers win last night. Big Ben is back, and unfortunately, as a Bengals fan, I'll have to just suffer in the AFC. But Excited to have the opportunity to be the moderator today. Stephan, I'm the Vice President for CGI in the Columbus sector. A lot of our work in Ohio is with the state of Ohio, and then we have a number of commercial clients as well in Central Ohio. Columbus is a great town, a growing city. We are now the second largest Midwestern city in the country. So watch out, Chicago, we're coming for you. We have a great panel today of gentlemen who have not just been CIOs in their current positions or the equivalent, but have had the title of CIO in many different at many different companies and in many different situations. And we are going to hear from them today about not going from the time of what and when to how and what's next. So with that, I'm going to start with going through with introductions. And Mark, would you kick us off with a brief bio?
Sure, John. Thank you. I'm Mark Miko. Good morning. I'm the CIO at Duquesne Light. We're the regional electric utility for the greater Pittsburgh area. I've been in the role a little over 5 years now, and it's mostly been a transformational role, large system replacement, large technology transformation. I've been a CIO for the last 15 years at various companies within the Pittsburgh area. And prior to that, I did management consulting in the public utility space for about 10 years as a Deloitte consultant.
Thank you, Mark. And Craig, would you go next with a brief intro?
Yes, absolutely. Good morning, everyone. My name is Craig Dean. It's great to be here today. I am the Chief Technology Officer for Orrick, Harrington and Sutcliffe. Orrick is a global law firm. We've got about 1,300 attorneys around the globe. I'm located in Wheeling, West Virginia at our Global Operations Center. So I guess maybe I'm the bridge between Columbus and Pittsburgh today, given that we're kind of in the middle of the two. Orrick is headquartered in San Francisco, but about 20 years ago, was kind of at the forefront of the legal industry and brought all of our kind of back office functions, IT, HR, finance, into one location in the Wheeling, West Virginia area. I've been at Orrick for a little over 8 years. Prior to that, I was the Chief Information Officer at MedRad, a medical device company in Pittsburgh. And prior to that, I did a good bit of consulting in the manufacturing and distribution industries with Accenture. And for those of you in Pittsburgh, you may know the name of Solutions Consulting.
Thank you, Craig. Craig and I, in prep for this session, joked around that I'm happen to be an attorney who works for an IT company, and Craig is an IT professional who works for a law firm. So we're on opposite ends of the spectrum there.
And David, I joke that you got the better end of that deal. Anyway. So
I'll take it. David, would you mind giving a brief bio?
Sure. David White, CIO for Battelle. We are headquartered in Columbus, Ohio. We are a large not-for-profit research and development organization. We do a great deal of work with the federal government. We do contract research and development. We also do lab management for the federal government. Primarily located in the continental U.S., but we do work globally. I am the CIO, and I have been in this role for almost 9 years. Prior to that, I actually consider this my second career. I did almost 20 years in state government in various roles. And while in that space, primarily in accounting and finance and not in IT. So it's been an interesting transition into the IT world, which I kind of picked up on at the latter part of my career with the state, where I took on responsibility for plugging in the state's current ERP system, both HR and finance, and went on from that to do it for the state of New York and a couple of universities across the country. So a lot of experience in big system implementations.
Thank you, David. And as someone who lives in Columbus, David's being very humble that the implementation you talked about, the OAK system for the state, was a tremendous success and has been a success for the state of Ohio. So thank you. And Wesley Rhodes from Kroger. Wesley, would you mind?
I've been with Kroger for nearly 3 years now. Prior to that, I was with IBM for 18 years. My focus there was the office of the CEO, and I just did whatever came across the CEO's desk that needed attending to. A lot of very interesting, eclectic issues. I also was the deputy CTO of U.S. Federal for most of that career, and I worked on national security and defense issues. Before that, I focused on high-risk programmatics, nuclear power plant reengineering, a variety of other topics.
Thank you, Wesley. I will get into now our panel discussion. One thing I know, we're going to have a Q&A at the end, and in past Tech Council CIO Insights, I know a number of questions came up through the chat feature. So I want to encourage the use of the Zoom group chat. I will be paying attention as best as possible as we get into our panel discussion. But let's start. We did a prep session last week, and we were kind of talking through the world of IT today. And I know CGI, we have we look at the COVID and the concept of respond, rebound, and reinvent. Different phases that I kind of say are the Maslow hierarchy of needs for IT, and those are a fluid categories, and you might be responding and rebounding at the same time, or it's dynamic. And through our conversation last week, as we prepped with it, Wesley had a concept I think would be really good to start off with probably I'll just say it generally as it's the acceleration of IT. But Wesley, would you kind of kick us off with your sense of IT in the COVID world? I'll turn it over to you.
Alrighty, so the first thing you got to do when things come along is properly categorize them, right? So is this a crisis or an opportunity?
Right.
Now, the COVID for us certainly was a crisis for the country and crisis for customers. For us, it was an opportunity also, because we had made our entire corporation ready to go for continuous innovation. So as we looked at this, we were able to put in many technical changes and business model changes just fluidly. It was, for us, we met at the stores, and it wasn't unusual to put in 5, 10, 20 technical changes, and then put in those same number of business model changes at the same time, trying to meet the customer demand and their desires. So as you just take a step back from that iteration of nightly massive changes, technically massive changes in the business model, trying new ideas that a conservative company would have taken multiple years to put in, and we're doing these things overnight, getting customer feedback, cycles and cycles of feedback, and then modifying it. You come back and you just take a step back and say, you know what has really happened here is that we have a timeline of innovation that was 4 or 5 years in the future. And what we've done now, there isn't really just a new normal. What we've done now is accelerated ourselves to where the customer wanted us to be. So it's just a porting of time. We've gotten to a time machine, and then as far as our delivery of capability, we've moved ourselves up technically to where the customer wanted us to be. So it's a movement in time. It's not going to be this big elastic thing that now we're going to snap back. We've now moved our capability where the customer wanted it to be. So now the corporations have got to then catch up. We have to sustain the gains that we made. The big problem for me now is I've got to then take that as the starting point, and I have to re-innovate. I have to go figure out what is next. What do they want next? And I've got to go find those technologies, invent those things. And I believe recognizing that's going to be one of the biggest problems for companies to do, because I believe that many are expecting it to snap back to where it was, maybe just a little bit north of where it was, and I don't think that's it at all. You have ported to 5 years in your technical future, and now you've got to react to it. I believe that's one of the outcomes that we saw.
Thank you for that, Wes. And I know, Mark, you've had, being a heavily regulated industry with utilities, you've had a similar experience, but with the government regulation. Could you touch on that?
Yeah, sure, John. Thanks. Yeah, we're a 125-year-old regulated utility. So when Wes says that Kroger is conservative and moves slow. I think we've got him probably beat. But so I agree with Wes. We basically stepped into a time machine and have been able to accelerate the speed of technology innovation, the speed of technology deployment, really exponentially in our company, and drive business change at a rate and speed that was just, never accomplished in the past. So I look at it very positively from that perspective. One example is we're building an inventory of all of our circuits across the whole service territory. And the pre-COVID way of doing that was mobile devices in the hands of people, and foot patrols, as we called them, literally walking the entire service territory, taking photos and capturing our electrical circuits manually. While they were using technology to do it and to do the capture, it was still people and foot patrols on the ground. Once COVID hit, we shut that down and we moved to a LiDAR model where we're actually flying LiDAR with helicopters across the service territory, taking billions of digital images and billions of data points from the LiDAR now, and electronically mapping our electrical circuits and drawing those electrical circuits from that data that we're now achieving. So that's an example of how while LiDAR isn't a new innovation, the way we're applying LiDAR from a foot patrol to now fully automated mapping was the time machine for us at Duquesne Light, the big one. At least we have several other projects going on where we were able to accelerate technology and accelerate innovation as a result of COVID-19 as well. But that project where we were doing the electrical circuit mapping was really the big one for us.
It's incredible, and one of the things I know, David, touching on a topic that you brought up when we met, is how some I would say for Battelle's purposes, some innovation that had sat on the shelf for a couple of years now became critically important during COVID. Would you discuss that with Battelle and how you reacted?
Sure. So we have technology that we've deployed to decontaminate N95 masks across the country. And how did we get into that business? As you alluded to, it was a study, a white paper that we had done a number of years ago, actually for the federal government. And it was just sitting on a shelf. And the whole idea of decontamination actually came up during a family dinner of one of our employees and their wives. And she's a doctor, he's a researcher, and she said, hey, we're running out of supplies. It would be great if we could just decontaminate these things and reuse them. So, oh yeah, we've done that before. We'll go into work tomorrow and we'll see what we can do. So we found the researcher that did the original study and said, yeah, this is not a problem. So we went from ideation to proof of concept. We built out an actual unit and proved that it would work. And then we had to scale, not just for our region, but we had to scale nationwide. And so we think about that and the challenges with that. We went from ideation to building out scale models within less than 30 days, and then actually building out to scale for the entire country within about 120 days. A lot of logistics behind the scenes, a lot of supply chain work had to happen. And, we're a company of about 4,000 employees. We added another 1,000 people just to support this operation and operate the systems across the country. We ran into the issues that, we just didn't anticipate. Like, did we have enough licenses within our HR system to support all these new employees? How do we work with our vendors to get that moving pretty quickly? I'm happy to say that in every vendor that I reached out to, all of them responded the same way. And that was, you're doing great things to support what we're doing across the country with COVID. So go forth and deploy. We'll true up with you later. I'm afraid of that later date because it hasn't hit me yet, and I'm sure it's going to be a pretty interesting ticket once I see that, because we've consumed a lot of resources and not worried about what it's going to cost right away. And that's to their credit. That's great. I really appreciate that. I'm sure they're keeping track of it, but it's been really great to see how the vendor support community has responded to us. But taking that innovation and again scaling it very quickly, right? I'm not sure of any other companies that I've worked for that actually could take a concept like that and scale it nationwide and do it in less than a year, let alone we did it in about 4 months. So it's a really interesting case study that we've actually proven out, and we've done it out of necessity. You had to do it, you had to be able to deploy, and you really needed to support the country in this crisis.
Kind of a mini Marshall Plan for mass, for sure, definitely. Craig, would you mind touching on how this has impacted the legal world? I know you've mentioned video depositions. Are they here to stay? Will people ever go back to in-person quizzing of witnesses?
Yeah, I'm sure they will. I mean, when we have that chance, right, there's that personal dynamic. But I think the legal industry as a whole is having to kind of be pulled into adopting new technologies that we've had in place and had available for years. So, for Orrick specifically, because we don't have products, we don't have supply chains, our attorneys and the client relationships are really what's important. This became more of a technology adoption and training kind of crisis for us, as opposed to any kind of product or having to put in new technologies or innovations. We have we have plenty of technologies to collaborate with our clients, to do things online, like electronic signatures, to do Zoom calls, but attorneys work differently than each other. And we had pockets of attorneys that were using all these technologies that were driving that kind of innovation with their clients. But we also had a large group of attorneys that came into their office every day, waited for IT and their executive assistants to set up video conferences, worked on their phones at their desk. So our first 4 to 6 weeks was really spinning up classes, making everybody aware of what technology were available, and giving them best practices to use in this new world where they were having to collaborate to some extent, work on their own. They didn't have the direct day-to-day access with their executive assistants, and so that was our real challenge. And I think for us, the long-term implication is going to be that our technology curve hasn't gone 5 years, but the adoption of our technology has gone gone 5 years. And the vast majority of attorneys now grasp technology, are using it, and I think see the benefits of it. And I really think going forward, as we're putting new technologies and new innovations in place, they're going to be received well. People understand the benefits of those, and the adoption is my strong hope is going to be much higher and much quicker than what we've seen in the past.
Thanks, great. And one of the things you touch on with the human element to it, right, is our folks are going to they either have to swim or drown to continue in being successful as attorney. One of the things I know David mentioned really, or you touched on, was innovation means risk, and risk can sometimes mean some of these quick to market or quick implementations may not work like you anticipated them to work. So moving forward for our panel, do you think these dramatic quick implementations are here to stay? Are our companies open for maybe some more risk in terms of the innovation we take on? Any thoughts on that?
It's Wes. I can give you one thought on that. So risk is here to stay, and you better, or you're going to miss all the first mover advantages. So there's a lot that you're going to leave on the table if you don't risk. So the question, I don't think, is risk. I think the question is, have you set up your mitigation strategy such that you can tolerate the risk? So everything needs to be thought of from a risk management perspective. If you ingrain that in the way you're doing your work, then your ability to systemically put it all the way through all your processes is what you're wanting to get. So when you think about an innovative company, every innovative company has at their heart, imbued through the entire organization and delivery and so forth, that notion of risk management, risk understanding, risk mitigation, the ability to put something in bold, risk it do it in the place that causes you the least harm, pull it right back out very quickly, have the measurements to understand the minute it's starting to go south, and so forth. So being bold and being risky aren't necessarily synonymous. Mm-hmm. Being bold and doing it in a measured way with really fast mitigation strategies that you can pull back and so forth is the key. Because one of the things that COVID has done, as we talked about in our prior discussions that we've snapped forward, is customers want us to move quickly. And now they have an appetite for it. They know that we can. So now you have to go add the other components of innovation, rapid innovation, and risk management is part of it.
One thing I'll add, John, is just in our industry being regulated, we have regulations both at the federal level and at the state level. So we've always had relationships with those regulators, but I would say that this new form of risk, I agree with Wes, it's here to stay. It's driving new types of relationships, new types of conversations with the state and federal regulators, because a lot of times we don't want those regulations to get in the way of that speed to innovation, that speed to delivery. So we find ourselves working with them a lot closer to bring them along and accelerate the speed by which regulators are willing to make changes and accept new technologies or new ways of doing things that may be crossing the line of some previous regulation. So while we are interested in taking on more risk, as Wes described and you described in the question, that we have to strike that balance with regulators and get them on that same page as well. So that's just a new, an additional dimension that we have as a heavy regulated company.
And I'll weigh in here also. So we too operate within that heavily regulated space, specifically with the federal government, who in all of the challenges we're seeing in the world is in the process of rolling out a brand new security standard for working with the Department of Defense. And, it's a result of the government being burnt many times by companies that self-attested to their level of security within their companies and then get breached. And, when you go back and say, well, you said you were at this level of security, in reality, they really weren't. And so now the standard is not only do you have to operate at a certain level, that we also want a third party to verify this. And so that's all going to affect us starting probably next year and from that point forward. And I kind of have a feeling that it's going to be the way that anybody doing business with the government is going to have to operate. And so how do you innovate when you're being put into these kind of restricted boxes from a compliance regulatory perspective? One of the things that we're discussing now and really trying to get our arms around is how do we quickly deploy some of these innovation environments where it can be a safe place to do things that you wouldn't normally do, but to do it in a safe enclave, whether that is cloud-based or whether it is within your on-prem data center, if you still have one of those, and allows you to do the innovation, but also not break any type of the compliance regulations you've put in place within your networks and your organizations.
Yeah. And if I could just add to that, so within the legal space, take something as, I think that's as standard in most industries as using the cloud and SaaS applications. The legal industry has been slow to adopt those, whether it be because of client restrictions, data privacy, confidentiality reasons. We at Orrick have been kind of on the forefront of that, trying to push that boulder up the hill within the industry, but it's always a very slow process. I think because of the benefits of the cloud that we've been espousing for years were witnessed during this period. We, along with most law firms, are going to be much more interested in continuing into the cloud and moving data into the cloud. I mean, we were able to scale up our technical infrastructure much quicker than if we'd been on-prem still. People were able to access their documents, their emails right from anywhere. We're doing Zoom calls instead of using our in-office infrastructure. And so those benefits that to some people were maybe not evident, we're seeing and are seen as why we've been able to get through this and be as productive and efficient and continue with our business model as we've needed to do. So my hope and my genuine belief is that's going to allow us to drive innovations and drive them into the cloud much more quickly than we would have been otherwise been able to do.
Thank you, Craig. I'm paying attention to our group chat, and I think there's a question that came from Shannon that's along these lines, and it's really it's a great question. How do you handle the shadow IT applications, right? As we're having all this innovation and moving forward, the one-offs by the departments or the legacies that we are replacing as we move forward during COVID. Craig, your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, that's a great question. Right? No.
Yeah.
So we're very fortunate in that we partner closely with a group within Orrick, an innovations group that really is kind of our eyes and ears out into the different practice areas. And they've got great relationships and have put processes in place, hopefully, to work with those groups when they need technology and bring those back to us. And so I think because we've developed that relationship and have put those processes in place, have been more likely to catch that than not. However, we are finding, people are spinning up things in cloud data centers. They're getting Slack accounts and things like that, just through the wire. And so we're being very proactive in trying to reach out to everybody in the firm, make them understand that's not a great thing to do, and do our best to capture that before it gets out of hand. I think Microsoft Teams is a great example of that. We really hadn't been broad users of Teams as we went into the March-April timeframe. We were kind of thinking about it, and we just saw all kinds of people understanding that Teams was available to them and starting to spin up team sites and use those without really thinking through where the data was going, where it was being stored. And so we've kind of had to take a step back, really spend time over the last couple of months looking at the governance that we have in place with Teams, how to get team sites set up, what can go into Teams, and those kind of things. And so it's I don't know that I have a great answer. It's just really kind of keeping your eyes and ears open and having people out in the enterprise kind of helping out through that.
For other members of the panel, your thoughts on those shadow IT applications?
So again, I alluded to the fact that we're heavily regulated from a compliance perspective. And so allowing folks to go out to the cloud or create their own applications is problematic. And one of the basic questions you have to ask yourself is what they're trying to do, is the data that they're working with, is this official data from an enterprise or an application perspective? If it is, then you really should have some general IT controls wrapped around what you're doing, how you're managing it. If it is a single source of truth, then you've got to manage it from that perspective. You shouldn't be putting any systems in production that you don't have any awareness of, and you have some idea of the data that's there. But in addition, we have a larger perspective around, what is our data strategy? Where is our data? What is it? How do we classify it? And how do we get the most out of protecting it, as well as how do we get the most out of mining that data? And when you have some of these shadow applications out there, you kind of lose track of some of that, and you need to have some visibility there. So we try to stay out in front of that as much as possible. We do have controls in place that if someone wants to go out to create a shadow system that is not on our approved list, then it's initially blocked, and then we'll have to have that conversation to understand what you're doing and see if that's something that we want to work with moving forward. So that's kind of how we've dealt with it. We have opened up the gates for some applications where we can actually have a solid business case, but in general, within our environment, you just can't go out and spin up an application because that's what you want to do.
I'll give you a point of view from our company's way. We tightly control the data. Very, very, very tightly control the data. So hard to spin up something when you have the data that's so tightly controlled. That's one thing. The other thing is we use culture. Our highly empowered people, but the culture is very focused on what's doing right for the customer. So we're a product-led company, so we have a method of how we go through and present applications and experiences to the customer. So that kind of limits the space that you can go spin up something that does other ancillary things. So the things that really matter to the customer, matter to the corporation, fall under those customer experiences and those data protected elements. So it sort of contains that shadow IT component in of itself, just those two massive constricting forces. And then through education, we get them where they understand the impact of what they're doing. So at one point in time, that was a problem. It's just not really a problem now.
Thank you, Wes. And Mark, I know something you touched on when we met is the fact that as a utility, you've had some, if you were operating in normal in normal business time, you would have taken some steps in terms of client interaction, but now you are restricted. So you've had to put some safeguards, some guardrails on how you can, it's the continuity of customer service, correct? And it's the collections aspect, all those types of things with the utilities being prohibited from kind of normal course of business. Is that correct?
Yeah. So since the pandemic outbreak in March, the Public Utility Commission put basically a moratorium in place that doesn't allow us to charge late fees, doesn't allow us to turn off power for delinquent bills, those kinds of things. And it's just a safeguard for our customers. So if they're struggling financially, we're there to help them get through that. And, if they've lost their job or can't get unemployment and those kinds of things and can't afford to pay their bills, then we're not coming back when they don't pay the power bill and turning them off. So very similar to kind of Wes's intro answer, where he had to respond to massive demand for groceries in the stores and getting people into the stores and getting groceries to folks for survival. We had to react, and once those mandates came down, I would call it probably rapid application development that took place. So we quickly designed solutions and then quickly developed solutions to meet those new regulations or meet the new moratorium. So again, it's more of that acceleration, more of that. Again, what we did for those particularly, I wouldn't call very innovative, but the speed again was accelerated. Traditionally, a change to delinquency process could have taken us months to design, build, and roll out, and train, and do all the change management work around it, not only with our employees, but with our customers. And instead, we had to do it in days. And I think that new way of operating, that accelerated way of operating, again, for me, is one of the big benefits of this. If I have to see a positive in this whole situation, that to me is one of the great positives that will come out of it.
Thank you. Kind of a big overarching question is, what does the work of the future look like for you? Is work from home here to stay, in your shops? Mark, you want to take that one on to start?
Yeah, I mean, yes. Obviously, we have about 1,600 employees, and we've got about 1,000 of them working from home. The other 600 are, I'll call them field workforce, men and women in trucks, in buckets, getting up, touching the poles and wires and things. So obviously hard for that field workforce to stay at home. So, but our 1,000 folks that are more of office type employees, definitely, I think it's here to stay. I think we will end up with some kind of hybrid model, well into 2021. But the technology's been great. The quick deployments have worked well, and we're finding that we can be just as productive and sometimes more attentive when we're working from home. We're also able to minimize our interactions, personal interactions, at least during the pandemic time frame, with that field workforce. That field workforce is extremely critical to us. Obviously, if we're not able to provide power and keep it up and running reliably, that's a huge problem for the Pittsburgh area. So we're working very hard to keep those 600 employees that are out in the field safe, and keep them, working so that the reliability of the power can be there.
And Wes, I know your industry is so different, but I remember 2 years ago, a click list seemed like a new concept. What's your take on work from home?
Well, 18 years in IBM, I think the only time I was ever really in an office is when I worked in Armonk in corporate strategy during that time period. Outside of that, I was never in an office. So I see no need to be there. As long as you've got good collaboration tools, we know the techniques, we know how to do it. All my team works remote now. Remote's cheaper, remote's faster, more productive. You just have to understand how to work remotely. There's some rules, there's some different management techniques you have to have. But after that much time with IBM, I certainly learned them and exercised them. And I think that's the way to go. Not to say that meeting the people that you work with and manage isn't something you need to do. It is, but I see absolutely no reason to have the expense of the large buildings and so forth. There are some that need to work in an office, and there's some reasons for that. I just think that most of the workforce that isn't working inside of a store, inside of a physical property that you must have a storefront, there's a way to compensate for almost all that and have a good home experience, a good work-life balance. It can aid that. So although we'll have those things, I'm giving you a personal point of view, not a corporate point of view. I should make that very clear. That the corporation is not saying these things. They've not spoken on that. I'm just giving you my point of view, seeing no reason to be there. They may have a different point of view. But as long as you've got a technical way of getting together and you've conquered the management mechanisms for them, which are absolutely out there, you can absolutely do this well. You get massive talent uplift when you get rid of the geographical boundaries. You get massive productivity uplift and the work-life balance. I think it's great.
So, let me weigh in real quick. So we have a kind of a dichotomy of what we have to take into account at Battelle. Again, we are a really large research and development organization, and we do a lot of work in life sciences, so we have to have lab space. And when you're working, in some cases, we do research with doing vaccines and different things for, say, anthrax. You can't take that stuff home, right? You've got to work with that within lab space, and so people have to go into lab space to do that type
Prefer
of work.
that you not.
Yeah. And so from that perspective, we probably have had about 800 employees that never left working in the office because you just have to. The rest of the company, most of us have transitioned to working remotely, and that's worked out well. It started off as, this is going to be a temporary thing, and now it's a longer term thing, and you see different issues with that. One of the issues that I'm sure everybody has seen is that your new single point of failure is network connectivity. A lot of times your home network is not as robust as it needs to be, and you may need to make some investments there. We've actually had some employees to ask if the company's going to help out with that so that they can get to the higher level of internet at home and so forth. We haven't done that, but these are the different dynamics that you may run into as you transition much of your workforce from office where you're paying that expense to them working at home and they're paying that expense. It becomes a question of, what is your obligation as an employer to your employee when they actually have to create their own workspace where you were paying for that when they were in your actual physical facility. that's going to be an interesting question moving forward. I've actually had 2 employees that have not, hopefully, luckily they haven't asked for the money, but they've asked for relocation opportunities. They're living in an area where it's a little bit more expensive, and they've asked to move back to an area where it's a little bit more cost effective for them, and essentially making them permanently remote. And we haven't pulled the trigger on that yet, but we're seeing more and more of this, where the question becomes, from the individual perspective, where do I want to live? Because if I can work remotely, I want to make this a low cost equation for myself. And then the last thing, and those of you with kids may appreciate this, some parents just want to get the hell out of the house because I can't be there at the same time I'm trying to do homeschooling. I can't focus. I've got too many distractions. And so you've got both of those things you have to deal with because your kids are at home too. And, they're trying to figure out what it means to be remote from a school perspective, as well as you're all on the same bandwidth and how are you all productive now in this house? And, it's not uncommon to have a team meeting that includes my team and their kids and pets and everything else.
Yeah. It's great. I think you hit the nail on the head for sure. As a parent of a 5 and a 7-year-old, I feel that pain. Hey, we had a question from Adam Paulisic, and I think he asked what's worth spending material dollars on right now, and I think dollars always come with priorities, right? So what are the material priorities for your organizations? David, would you continue on that question? If you look at
For us, I've prioritized my work. I think in our pre-call I mentioned I'm in the middle of an ERP financial suite replacement, so that's kind of my top priority in getting that up and running. We're planning to go in production at this time next year. October 1 of next year is when we're going to production there. My second priority is positioning the company to be able to achieve the cybersecurity certification that we have to in order to do work with the Department of Defense. Number 3 is continuing to enhance what we're doing from a data perspective. We've got a pretty good handle on our data. Now we want to enhance that and look at how we can potentially monetize the data that we have within the company. We're a 90-year-old company with lots of very deep research. It's one thing to have your arms around it, but how do you take advantage of all that data? And then lastly, we've had a pretty federated approach to doing software development. So we're in the early stages of doing what we call a software strategy, where we're bringing that back to a central perspective, not necessarily centralizing all the people, but all the processes, the tool sets, and so forth, so that we can really leverage some of the advantages of cloud from a software development perspective. If you think about the capabilities available, just trying to leverage some of the Apache tool sets and so forth, if you had to do that within your on-premise data center, it becomes a very long and expensive endeavor, but you can have those tools available to you almost immediately in almost any cloud that you can get access to right now. And so how do you really develop those capabilities, but not just develop the capabilities, but to do it in a safe and secure way, so that you've got a process where you're doing development with secure by design at the beginning of your development processes.
Thank you, David. And just continue with the questions we have on the chat. Craig, we have a question on AI robotics being an integral part of the future from Deb with CGI. Is AI robotics in the future of law firm IT? Is that something you all? I would think Kroger.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, actually, it's already here. Not the robotics piece as much as the AI piece. So if you think about the transaction side of the legal industry, there's a lot of tasks that are repetitive, mundane, right? Looking at contracts as an example. If you're going through mergers and acquisition, looking for different clauses, different different things within contract database, change of control kind of things. And so there's really a kind of a large move in the legal industry, a lot of small startup innovative companies that are using AI to kind of learn from what you've done in the past and to make those tasks more automated, as opposed to having entry-level associates kind of go through that process manually. So one of the challenges, honestly, again, because I think we're maybe a little bit behind other industries, is there's just a ton of startup applications, ton of technologies coming to bear on the industry. And one of our challenges is just kind of getting through all of those to understand which ones really have value and which ones won't have value to bring to bear and improve our client service and our efficiency of delivery.
Thank you, Craig. We have a number of questions on workforce, both, I think from a geographical standpoint from talent, but then also keeping our the workforce updated on these rapid deployments. That was a question from Brooks Canavisi. Mark, would you like to touch on that one with keeping the workforce up to speed on all these rapid deployments?
Yeah, so for us, the primary thing with our workforce is safety. So we're obviously in a very dangerous and essential job. Power. You see a storm come through, and a bunch of trees wipe out power lines. Obviously, it's a dangerous situation. So we prioritize safety when it comes to our workforce as kind of the number one thing. Now, fortunately for IT and technology, there's not a ton of technology investment. Those technologies that are related to safety are relatively inexpensive. So it's relatively easy for me to prioritize that high. The rest of our workforce, the workforce that's more office-based, we're making investments in a lot of the things that were mentioned in the question. But we're revisiting our training, our workforce development, our leadership development. We're actually working with the local Pittsburgh company, Edge Leadership, to actually create new programs around leadership development in the post-COVID world. So we're already partnering with thought leaders in training on the new way to deliver training. And obviously those are both virtual as well as in person, and some different unique ways of thinking about training. So, we take, the other thing is with the being a critical, business, it takes our talent acquisition process, recruiting process. It takes a special person. It adds to the interview, if you will. For somebody that even in an IT role, to work in a life sustaining business, it takes a special person. We've noticed that needs to become part of our interview process. And it's interesting that we're finding that folks either want to do it or they want nothing to do with it. So that, they're interested in that. They don't mind being woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning because their system isn't working properly and it's affecting our ability to restore power, or it's causing harm to the network or something in our system that prevents power from being delivered to the customer. So again, we're finding that folks either thrive on that or don't want anything to do with it. So, we've definitely had to change. We've had to adapt not only our training, our recruiting processes. I think just like everybody else, we're revisiting office space and what that means. We talked about working remotely. So all of those things are factors in the new workforce and preparing the workforce to work for us.
Thank you, Mark. We got 5 minutes left. I know, Wes, folks asked you to touch on the AI component too with Kroger. Would you mind going back to that topic and touch on that AI from a retail perspective?
All righty. So So first, understand Kroger for a moment. You think of Kroger as a grocery store. Certainly it does sell groceries, but it also has 30 manufacturing sites. We've got labs in universities. We have industrial labs and a very large ecosystem. So we are a technology company. So when you think of that question about AI robotics, we think of it as how do I take all this technology and hide it so you don't see it? So where's our focus? Kroger's focus is on the customer experience. It's on security in all things and protecting that. It's on generating low costs. So as I start thinking through those topics, which are Kroger goals, I'm looking at all the advanced technologies from our analytics company. I think of, and I draw from our personal finance company. I draw from all the labs that I've got, and we are doubling down on AI, context computing. We have a dedicated set of folks that just do nothing but robotics. We make them. We make the electronics. We have partners that are with us to help do some of the other things that we don't have as organic skills. But we just don't have them running around the store. We have them off at the back. We have them integrated into the store. So are they part of it? Yes. I make it where it's just not so obvious that it is. So for us, we use those same sets of capabilities and technologies, not only to help in a variety of different ways for the customer, but we embed those also to do double duty to understand, do directive labor and various other cost conservative functions also. So I've got entire sets of staffs trying to get the most bleeding edge components of AI, but that in of itself, as we embed that inside all the technologies we have, I don't look at it just as in that app in the digital format that you see the customer interacting with it. We try and blend that physical and digital environment so it's one cohesive experience. So we put it through all the applications all along the way. So for us, a very huge focus is the AI components of the app, looking at it in the corresponding data, collecting that up and putting it with the analytics program, and looking at the entire trip and figuring out where we can add any of these components to make it the most cohesive experience possible. So yeah, I've got it everywhere within R&D, and I'm constantly moving that down into the application verticals for inserting it wherever in the pipeline I can put it.
Thank you, Wes. And we're going to start our networking breakout sessions here at 9:30, but we have a couple minutes left. Is there anything else our panelists would like to just as a final comment, anything that you want to share?
This has just been a great forum. I appreciate the opportunity to participate.
Thank you, David.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us. And again, big thanks to our panelists, Mark, Craig, David, and Wesley for taking the time and for the prep on this session. Appreciate all the questions. I don't think I got to all of them, and my apologies if I didn't get to your question, but I tried to capture as many as possible. So Audrey or Monica, I think our next step is to go into the networking breakout sessions.
Yes, that's correct. We'll be going over to our networking session. So each of them will be 15 minutes. We'll conclude at 10 o'clock. So when you get into the breakout room, just make sure to introduce yourself and talk about the session, and then we'll go from there. So thanks everyone for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.